She sat on a wooden stool that shook a little every time she moved, but she didn't mind. The piano in front of her was old, scratched, and missing paint on the sides, but she treated it like something precious. Every morning, before the sun rose too high and the streets became loud, she would sit there and let her fingers touch the keys. Some keys were heavy, some were loose, and a few didn't even make a sound anymore. Still, she played with all the feeling her small hands could deliver. People from the neighborhood had gotten used to seeing her there. Some stopped just for a moment to listen, while others paused a little longer before going on with their day. She wasn't playing for fame or for applause. She played because music helped her breathe through the weight of her life. And she played because she needed to earn a little money. Not for herself, but for her mother, whose wheelchair squeaked and wobbled so badly it was becoming dangerous. Every coin mattered. She kept her tiny tin box close, hidden behind the piano leg so no one could snatch it. The sound of coins landing in the box gave her hope, even when the days were slow. That morning, the sky was still soft and pale when she started playing. She chose one of the melodies she had made up herself. It didn't have a name, and she never tried to give it one. It was simply a song that held all the things she never said out loud: her fears, her dreams, her tired heart. She leaned forward and let the music flow. The tune rose and fell like a small story, and she played it with closed eyes, letting each note take shape on its own. The street was quiet, except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional chirp of a bird perched on a wire. A few people dropped coins as they passed. One man smiled softly. A woman carrying a bag of bread stopped for half a minute, listening with her head tilted slightly. The girl felt grateful for every person who paused, even those who didn't drop anything. Just knowing they heard her made her feel seen. She wasn't aware that someone else was watching her from across the street. A man in a dark jacket stood by a parked car. He wasn't part of a neighborhood, that was clear. His shoes were too clean, and he kept checking a device in his hand. But the moment he heard her playing, he stopped. Something in the music made him look up. He watched her closely, not in a strange way, but in a thoughtful one. He noticed how she didn't sit straight, as if she was too used to bending over the piano for long hours. He saw how her fingers moved fast, slowing only when she played the part that felt heavier, deeper. Her face was calm, but her eyes held a kind of sadness that tugged at him. He reached for his phone and quietly recorded a short video. He didn't record her face much. He focused on her hands, on the piano, on the way her feet barely touched the ground. He didn't clap when she finished. He didn't approach her right away. Instead, he stood there a little longer, listening to the soft echo left in the air. After a while, he turned and walked back to his car. He sat inside, replaying the video. Then he sent it to someone with a simple message, something short that he knew his boss would understand. The girl didn't notice any of this. She had stopped playing for a moment to rest her fingers. She rubbed her hands together and breathed out slowly. Her stomach growled softly, reminding her she hadn't eaten yet. She brushed the thought aside. Breakfast could wait. The piano needed her more. She started playing again, this time a lighter tune, something playful. A group of young kids passing by laughed and copied her hand movements in the air. She smiled at them, grateful for the small bit of joy they brought. The sound of a distant bus rolling past made some dust rise from the road. A man pushing a cart full of fruit shouted out his daily prices. A bicycle bell rang. The street was waking up. As more people filled the area, she focused harder on her music. It wasn't easy to compete with the noise of the world, but she tried anyway. She wanted the sound of her piano to rise above everything else so that at least one person would pause, even if just for a heartbeat. When the sun climbed higher, she stopped again and wiped the sweat from her forehead. The keys felt warm now under her fingers. She glanced at her tin box. It wasn't full, but there were a few coins inside, just enough to remind her that the morning wasn't wasted. She leaned forward again. But before her fingers touched the keys, she heard someone ask, "Do you play here every day?" She turned quickly. A woman stood there with a gentle smile. The girl nodded shyly. "You play beautifully," the woman said. "I can feel the emotion in your music. Not many people can do that." The girl looked down, embarrassed but grateful. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman placed a note in the tin box. A note, not a coin. It was more than the girl expected, and she felt her chest tighten with gratitude. "Keep playing," the woman added softly. "Your music brings something special to this street." When she left, the girl closed her eyes and tried to hold on to that feeling. She took a slow breath, let her fingers rest on the keys, and continued. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, casting light on the piano's worn surface. She didn't stop unless she had to. The piano was her comfort, her friend, her voice. But deep within her heart, she carried a quiet worry. She needed more money to fix her mother's wheelchair. It was breaking down badly, and her mother struggled to move around. Sometimes the wheel got stuck. Sometimes it made a loud squeal that scared her mother into thinking something awful had happened. The repair cost was more than the girl could ever earn quickly, but she held on to hope. As she continued playing, she wondered how long it would take. She wondered if she would ever find a way to make life easier for the person she loved most. Yet even with the worry in her chest, she didn't let it show in her music. She let her notes rise higher, turning her fears into beautiful sound. By noon, the street became louder, and she knew it was time to stop. People rushed past without looking. Cars honked endlessly. Vendors shouted to get attention. Her music would be lost in the noise. She stood up slowly, stretching her back. Her legs were tired from sitting so long. She counted her earnings carefully, gently, and closed the tin box with a quiet sigh. It wasn't enough, but it was something. She hugged the box to her chest. She looked at the piano one last time before leaving. She touched the keys lightly, as if saying goodbye until tomorrow. Then she walked slowly down the street, unaware that the video recorded earlier had already been seen by the CEO's household. Unaware that her simple music had reached someone she had never met. Unaware that her life was about to change in a way she could never imagine. For now, she was just a girl heading home with tired hands and a hopeful heart, carrying a tin box filled with coins and quiet dreams. The sun had already moved far across the sky when the video reached the CEO's office. It arrived quietly, without any dramatic message or long explanation. Just a short clip and a few words from the driver who served him faithfully every day. The CEO didn't expect anything special. He thought it was another update about schedules or security. But when he opened the video, he felt his entire body go still. The camera wasn't focused on a face. Instead, it showed a pair of small hands moving across old piano keys. The keys were worn out, chipped in some places, and the sound wasn't perfect, but the feeling behind the music was undeniable. The girl's fingers moved with a kind of honesty that didn't need training or fancy studios. Every note she played felt like it carried a story of struggle, a story of strength, a story of someone who had learned life the hard way, yet still found beauty somewhere inside it. The CEO leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the melody wash over him. He had heard countless musicians. Some were famous. Some were professionals. Some had trained for years. But this simple, raw sound felt different. When the music reached the softer part, something shifted inside him. He opened his eyes slowly, thinking of his young son waiting at home. His son couldn't see the world the way everyone else could. But he felt things deeply, sometimes more deeply than people with sight. Music was the one thing that still brought warmth to his life, even after all the challenges he faced. But lately, even music hadn't helped him smile. The boy had withdrawn into silence, losing interest in the world around him. Doctors tried. Therapists tried. Even musicians came to play for him, hoping to reach him somehow. But none of it worked. The CEO watched the video again. Then again. With each replay, he became more certain of one thing. This girl's music carried something pure, something his son might feel. He didn't waste time. He called the driver and asked him to return to the area where the video was taken. The CEO wanted to know everything where she played, what she looked like, how she carried herself, and whether she would ever be willing to visit their home. While the driver went back to the neighborhood, the CEO left his office for the day. He canceled all his meetings, ignoring the surprised faces of those who worked with him. He didn't offer any explanation. He simply said he needed to be somewhere else. His car arrived at the community center quietly. No one recognized him. He didn't wear anything that showed he was wealthy or important. Instead, he dressed simply, almost casually. He wanted to blend in, to understand the girl without making her uncomfortable. As he stepped onto the street, he saw the old piano immediately. It stood like a small survivor among the noise of the city. People walked past it. Some ignored it. Some glanced at it. But it was clear that this piano had lived a long life. He looked around for the girl, but she wasn't there yet. The piano looked lonely without her. He stood a short distance away, trying to imagine how she must look while playing, how her hands must move in real life, rather than through a small video screen. The driver soon returned and approached him quietly, whispering that the girl usually came early in the morning and played until midday. But sometimes she returned later if she hadn't earned enough. She didn't play for fun. She played because life had pushed her into a corner where even a small coin mattered. The CEO listened carefully, absorbing every detail. The sun began to soften, and the evening breeze brushed past his face. He waited patiently, unsure if she would return that day. Just as he was about to leave, he heard soft footsteps approaching the piano. He turned and saw her, the same girl from the video, with tired eyes and gentle hands. She carried a small tin box close to her chest, guarding it like something precious. Her clothes were simple, and her shoes were worn out, but her presence carried a quiet strength. She sat down on the shaky wooden stool and placed the tin box carefully by her side. She wiped the piano keys with her sleeve, as if showing respect to the old instrument. Then she breathed in deeply, closed her eyes, and began to play. The CEO didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply stood still, listening with his entire heart. The melody began softly, growing deeper with every passing second. The street's noise faded into the background. Cars kept moving, people kept talking, but he heard none of it. He focused only on the girl and the sound she was creating. For a moment, she opened her eyes and noticed him standing there. She didn't know who he was, but she saw kindness in his expression. She felt a gentle curiosity rather than judgment. So she didn't stop playing. Instead, she let the music speak for her. He watched her fingers carefully. He noticed how she pressed the keys just hard enough to bring out the emotion, but not so hard that the old piano would break under the pressure. Her technique wasn't perfect, but her heart was. When she finished the piece, silence filled the air for a second. She pulled her hands back slowly and looked down, almost embarrassed. The CEO stepped forward gently. "That was beautiful," he said softly. She nodded but didn't say anything. She wasn't used to rich-looking strangers talking to her. She tightened her grip on the tin box. "Do you play here every day?" He asked. She hesitated, then quietly said, Yes, mostly in the mornings. And why do you play? She didn't answer right away. She looked at her hands as if the truth was written there. For my mother, she finally whispered. She needs her wheelchair fixed. I'm trying to save money. That's why I play. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. The CEO felt something heavy settle in his chest. Her reason wasn't selfish. It wasn't for attention. It came from love. He wanted to help immediately. He wanted to tell her he could fix everything for her. But he also knew not to scare her or overwhelm her, Dot, so he kept his tone gentle. Would you be willing to play for someone? He asked. Dot. She blinked, surprised. Play for who? My son, he answered quietly. He's young. He's blind. And he loves music more than anything. But lately, he hasn't been himself. I think your music might help him. The girl's eyes widened with worry. I'm not trained. I don't know any big songs. I only play what I feel. That's exactly why I want you to play for him, he said. You play with emotion. That's what he understands best. She looked down at her tin box. She wanted to help, but she was scared. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she disappointed the boy? What if the CEO expected something she couldn't give? But something in his voice felt honest. He didn't speak like someone who wanted to use her. He spoke like someone who simply wanted his son to feel something again. Dot. After a long moment, she took a breath and said, I can try. The CEO smiled, a soft and grateful smile. Thank you. I know it's not easy to trust strangers, but I'll take you home safely. And I'll bring you back safely too. She nodded slowly. He didn't rush her. He didn't force her. He simply guided her gently toward the car waiting nearby. For the first time, she saw the driver from earlier. He gave her a warm nod, recognizing her from the morning. Dot. As the car door opened, she hesitated once more. She looked back at the old piano, as if saying goodbye to the one thing that had always stayed beside her. Dot. Then she stepped inside. The CEO sat beside her, giving her space. He didn't talk much. The silence inside the car wasn't uncomfortable. It was calm, almost peaceful. Dot. As the car began to move, the girl watched the city through the window. She had never left her neighborhood before. The streets changed. The buildings grew taller. The world became bigger. Dot. Deep inside, she felt nervous. But she also felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Dot. Hope that she didn't know who the CEO really was. She didn't know where they were taking her. She didn't know what would happen when she played for the boy. But she knew one thing. This moment was pulling her life in a direction she never expected. And somewhere in a large home not far away, a blind boy waited quietly, unaware that the melody that would soon reach his heart had already begun its journey toward him. The ride to the CEO's home felt longer than it actually was. The girl sat quietly in the back seat, holding her tin box tightly against her chest, as though letting go of it would somehow make everything disappear. She kept her eyes lowered, most of the time afraid of looking out the window too long and revealing how overwhelmed she truly felt. The city outside flashed with lights, wide roads, and tall buildings she had never seen up close before. Everything felt too big, too fast, too different from the slow, familiar streets she grew up on. The CEO noticed her silence, but didn't disturb her. He understood that she wasn't used to this world, so he let her have her space, glancing at her only now and then to make sure she wasn't scared. The driver looked at her through the mirror once, offering a small, reassuring smile. He had seen countless people sit in that back seat, many confident and well-dressed. But this girl carried something else, something raw and sincere. When the car slowed down near a large gate, her heart thumped. She lifted her eyes slightly and stared at the huge metal door that opened automatically as the car approached. She had only seen gates like this in movies or passing news clips. She pulled her tin box closer and took a breath, trying to steady herself. The mansion inside the gates stood tall, with warm lights shining from the windows. The garden around it was carefully trimmed, the driveway smooth, and everything looked clean and beautiful. But instead of feeling impressed, she felt smaller than ever. She wondered why someone like her had been brought here. She wondered if she even belonged in a place like this. The CEO stepped out of the car first. Then he offered his hand to help her down. She hesitated but accepted it. Her shoes touched the ground softly, almost too softly for a place so grand. "Don't be nervous," he said in a calm voice. "You're here for something simple. Just be yourself." She nodded but didn't speak. Her tongue felt heavy. Inside the house, the floors shined as if someone polished them every hour. The air smelled faintly of flowers. She walked slowly, afraid she might accidentally dirty something. Her eyes moved carefully over the walls, the paintings, the large staircase, and the soft lights that glowed like stars. "My son is in the music room," the CEO explained gently as they walked. "He spends a lot of time there. It's the place he feels most comfortable." The girl listened quietly, each step making her heart beat louder. She wondered what the boy was like. Would he be kind? Would he like her music? Or would he think it was too simple, too rough, too untrained? When they reached the door of the music room, the CEO stopped. He turned to her and said, "There's no pressure. Just play the way you always do. My son will understand your heart more than anything else." She swallowed hard and nodded again. He pushed the door open slowly. Inside, the room was large but warm. Soft rugs covered the floor, and shelves filled with musical instruments stood against the walls. The air felt gentle, as if the space protected something fragile. Near the center of the room sat a young boy with closed eyes, his hands resting on his lap. His face was calm but distant, like he was listening to something only he could hear. He didn't turn his head toward them when they entered. He didn't react at all. "This is my son," the CEO said softly. "He may not look up, but he's listening." The girl's heart tightened. She took a small step forward. The boy tilted his head slightly, sensing new footsteps. His eyebrows lifted a little, searching. "She's the one I told you about," the CEO continued. The boy didn't speak, but he seemed to wait. The girl looked at the black grand piano that stood not far away. It was larger and more beautiful than any piano she had ever seen. The polished surface reflected the room's warm lights. She approached it slowly, afraid to touch something so perfect. The CEO nodded encouragingly. She took a quiet breath and sat down. The seat felt soft and steady, nothing like the shaky stool she used every day. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. She closed her eyes to calm herself. "Just breathe," she told herself. She started playing. The first note was soft, almost unsure. Then she let her heart guide her hands, just like she did on the street. The melody she chose was the same one that made people pause, the same one the driver had recorded, the same one that carried her deepest feelings. As she played, the room softened. The music drifted gently, rising and falling like a quiet wave. The boy lifted his chin slowly. For the first time in weeks, the CEO saw movement, a small but meaningful change. The boy's fingers twitched on his lap. His face shifted ever so slightly, as if he felt something familiar. The girl didn't notice. She was lost in her music. Her head bent forward, her shoulders relaxed, and her hands moved with honesty and emotion. Every note she struck carried her story, her mother, her long mornings at the piano, her worries, her tired hope. The CEO's eyes softened. He watched in amazement as the boy leaned forward a little, turning his face toward the sound. His breaths grew deeper, steadier. The sadness that shadowed his face for months seemed to loosen. Halfway through the melody, the boy moved his hands. Slowly, carefully, he reached toward the piano. The CEO held his breath. The girl kept playing, unaware of the small miracle happening in front of her. The boy's hand lifted higher, almost as if he was trying to touch the music itself. He tilted his head and listened with his whole being, as though the melody was filling a gap inside him that nothing else had reached. When the girl reached the softest part of the tune, a small smile, gentle and unforced, appeared on the boy's face. The CEO's eyes filled with quiet emotion. It had been so long since he had seen his son smile. The girl finally finished the piece, letting the last note linger in the air. She slowly lifted her hands from the keys, nervous about what might happen next. "Did he like it?" she asked in a small voice. The boy's smile widened slightly. "He did," the CEO said softly. "More than you know." The girl's shoulders relaxed. A wave of relief washed over her dot suddenly. The boy spoke, his voice soft but clear. "Play again." The CEO's heart nearly broke from joy. His son hadn't asked anyone to play in months. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. She nodded quickly, and without a moment's hesitation, she began again. This time the melody flowed more confidently. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. She could feel the boy's connection to her music, and it gave her courage. The boy listened with his whole heart, leaning toward every note. The CEO watched silently, his eyes reflecting gratitude he didn't know how to express. When she finished the second time, the boy whispered, "It's warm." The girl smiled softly. She knew he wasn't talking about the room's temperature. He was describing the feeling, the warmth inside the music. "Thank you," he added. Those two simple words meant more to her than any applause she had ever imagined. The CEO stepped closer. "You've done something today that no one else has been able to do. You made my son smile. You brought something back into his world." The girl looked down shyly. She didn't know how to respond. The boy reached out his hand toward the sound of her breathing. She gently took his hand, careful not to squeeze too hard. He smiled again. The CEO watched them quietly, knowing something important had begun in this moment, a bond formed not by sight or appearance or wealth, but by pure feeling. After a few minutes, he guided her out of the music room so his son could rest. She stepped outside with slow breaths, her heart still racing. "You played beautifully," the CEO said as they walked down the hall. "I can't thank you enough." She held her tin box tightly. "I'm glad he liked it." "Would you come again?" he asked. She paused. No one had ever asked for her music before. "Yes," she said softly, "if he wants me to." "He will want you to," the CEO said with certainty. As they reached the front door, the girl looked out at the night sky. She had come here trembling with worry. Now she felt lighter, as though the world had shifted in a way she couldn't explain. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew one thing clearly. Her music had reached someone's heart, and for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change. The next morning came with a calm sky, but inside the CEO's home, the air felt heavy with thoughts that no one wanted to say out loud. The little boy woke early, feeling more curious than usual. He kept thinking about the girl who had played so softly and kindly for him the night before. Even though he couldn't see her face, he felt like he knew her, or at least knew her heart. He remembered her touch on his hands, gentle and unsure at first, then warm and steady. Something about her music made him feel safe. He sat up in his bed and listened. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of workers downstairs. He turned his head a little, trying to catch any sign of the piano, any sound that would tell him she was there again. But there was nothing. His shoulders dropped. He wondered if she had already left. and the thought tugged at him in a way he couldn't explain. At the same time, the CEO was in his study, staring at the same papers he had been pretending to read for an hour. He wasn't usually a man who got distracted, but today his mind kept drifting back to the girl, her clothes, her posture, the way she trembled when she touched the piano. He kept replaying the moment she played for his son. Something about her had shaken him, though he didn't want to admit it. He had spent years building a life where everything stayed in control. He didn't like surprises, and he didn't like situations he couldn't predict. Yet this girl, with nothing but her talent and nervous hands, had walked into his perfectly arranged home and shifted something inside it. It bothered him, but he also couldn't ignore it. He stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, the staff moved around the garden, preparing for another busy day. The girl was nowhere in sight. He wondered if she had already left too. Maybe that was for the best, he told himself. She came from a world far away from theirs. It was better not to mix things that didn't belong together. But just as he turned away, he heard footsteps in the hallway. They were soft, slow, almost hesitant. Something made him stop and glance toward the slightly open door. The girl stood there. Her clothes were the same as the night before, clean, but clearly worn from use. She held her hands together as if trying to warm them. She had come early, maybe too early, unsure if she was even allowed to be here after everything. She spoke in a soft voice, not wanting to disturb him. I just came to check if someone needed help with anything. If not, I can go." He didn't answer at first. He studied her, trying to understand what she expected from him. Was she hoping for praise? Money? A chance? He couldn't tell. She looked uncomfortable under his gaze, but she didn't look away. Finally, he spoke. "Why did you come back?" She lowered her eyes. "Because I didn't want to leave without saying thank you. And I wanted to see if your son was okay after last night." The CEO wasn't used to people talking with such sincerity. Most people around him had motives, plans, goals. This girl spoke as if she meant every word in a simple way, without any hidden meaning. It made him uneasy, but it also made him curious. "He's fine," the CEO said. "He asked about you." The word surprised even him. She looked up quickly, her face brightening with relief. "I'm glad," she said softly. There was a pause. She looked like she wanted to say more, but didn't know if she should. He noticed the way she kept rubbing her fingers together. They were slightly red from the cold. He remembered the way she had played the piano, delicate, thoughtful, yet strong. "Do you want to see him?" He asked. She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. If it's all right." He nodded and walked past her into the hallway. She followed quietly. As they moved through the house, she felt small next to the tall walls and expensive decorations. She never imagined she would be in a place like this. Every step felt like she had to remind herself she was allowed to walk there. When they reached the boy's room, the door was slightly open. The boy sat on his bed, touching the blanket lightly with his hands. He turned his head quickly when he heard footsteps. "Is someone there?" he asked. The girl stepped forward and spoke gently. "It's me." The boy's face lit up. "You came back. I thought you left." "I stayed nearby," she said. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." He reached his hand out. She moved closer and took it in hers. His hand was warm and light, and she held it carefully, afraid to hurt him. The CEO watched from the doorway. Something in his chest tightened at the sight. His son rarely connected with anyone so quickly. Yet here he was, sitting calmly, smiling, holding the hand of a girl he had met only once. "Can you play again?" the boy asked. The girl hesitated and looked at the CEO. She didn't want to break any rule. The CEO gave a slow nod. "If you want," he said. The boy reached out toward her. Please, last night felt like my world wasn't so dark. Her eyes softened. All right, I'll play. She followed the boy's gentle steps as he held her hand, guiding her out of the room as if he could see. They walked toward the piano room. The CEO walked behind them silently, listening to the sound of their steps, one light and brave, the other unsure but steady. When they reached the piano, she sat down slowly. Her hands hovered above the keys, feeling the smooth surface. She let out a quiet breath. She still felt nervous playing in such a big house, in front of such an important man, but she reminded herself of why she was doing this. She wanted to bring comfort, not perfection. The boy stood close, one hand resting gently on the edge of the piano. He didn't need to sit. He just wanted to be near the music. The girl began to play. This time, her fingers moved with more certainty. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She played because it was the only way she knew how to speak without fear. The melody flowed like warm water, soft, deep, and sincere. The notes wrapped around the room, filling the quiet spaces and touching the air like a gentle breeze. The boy closed his eyes, not because he couldn't see, but because he wanted to feel every sound. He leaned slightly closer, as if the music itself was reaching out to him. His breathing calmed. His shoulders relaxed. The CEO stood behind them, frozen in place. He had heard countless musicians play in his life. Some played with skill, others with technique, but very few played with heart. This girl played as if the music lived inside her. He felt something shift again, this time stronger. He wondered what kind of life she lived. What kind of pain or dreams had shaped her hands into something that could create such beauty? And why someone with such talent had no place to go. When the music stopped, the boy sighed softly. I wish I could stay in that sound forever, he whispered. The girl smiled gently. Music doesn't disappear, she said. It stays inside you, even when the sound ends. The CEO stepped forward finally. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated. No one had asked her that in a long time with real meaning. She spoke her name softly, almost shyly. He repeated it quietly, letting the sound settle in the air. I want to ask you something, he said. The girl turned to him slowly. Would you consider staying here for a while? To play for my son? Not just once, not just today, but regularly. He hasn't connected to anyone this quickly in years. He paused. I will make sure you are taken care of. The girl froze. She looked from him to the boy, who stood quietly, waiting. His face hopeful even though he couldn't see hers. She wasn't sure what this offer meant for her life. She wasn't sure if she belonged in such a house. But she knew one thing: she didn't want to walk away from the boy's fragile smile. Slowly, she nodded. The boy let out a small breath of joy. The CEO watched them, unsure if he had made the right choice, but inside, something whispered that maybe this girl had walked into their lives for a reason, and he didn't want to ignore it. The days that followed moved in a way none of them expected. The girl, who once thought she didn't belong anywhere, soon found herself walking through the big house with a sense of quiet purpose. She didn't feel fully confident yet, but she no longer felt like she was intruding. Each morning she arrived early, and each time she did, the house seemed less cold than before. The boy always knew when she entered the room. Even without seeing, he sensed things through sound and feeling. The way her footsteps were soft and careful. The way she breathed slowly when she was nervous. The gentle way she spoke his name. These small things helped him feel close to her. Sometimes he asked her to play the piano for him. Other times, he simply wanted to sit nearby and hear her talk about simple things like the sound of the city. The way cold air felt in the morning, how she learned to play on an old, uneven piano she used to practice on when she found free time. She didn't talk much, but when she did, she spoke from her heart, and he listened to every word. The CEO watched all of this quietly. He had never seen his son so peaceful. The boy used to become tense when meeting new people, afraid they would pity him or treat him differently. But with the girl, everything was natural. She didn't treat him like he was fragile. She spoke to him like he was simply a person, not someone who needed special treatment. The CEO admired that thought one afternoon. The CEO called the girl to his study. She walked in slowly, unsure if she had done something wrong. He noticed the way she held her hands together and took a deep breath before speaking. "You don't have to be scared," he said gently. She relaxed a little, but still waited quietly. "I wanted to ask you how you feel here," he said. "Is it too much? Too different? I know this house is not easy to adjust to." She looked down for a moment before responding. "At first, I felt like I didn't belong," she admitted. "Everything here is so big and beautiful, and I was afraid I would break something or disturb someone. But your son, he makes me feel like maybe I have a place here. He listens to me. He trusts me. And when he smiles, I feel like I've done something good in this world." The CEO nodded slowly. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. "My son has been through a lot," he said quietly. "He doesn't open up easily. But you changed something in him. And you've changed something in this home, too." She looked at him, surprised. She wasn't used to hearing such things from anyone, let alone someone like him. "I want to offer you something more permanent," he continued. "Not just to visit, not just to come and go. I want you to stay. We can give you a room here, proper meals, anything you need. You can focus on playing, learning, growing. And you can continue giving my son what no one else has been able to give him: comfort and hope." Her eyes widened and her breath caught. No one had ever offered her anything like that. She had lived her whole life moving from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to feel settled. The idea of having a room, a bed, a space where she wouldn't have to worry about the next day, it felt unreal. "I don't want you to feel like this is charity," the CEO added quickly. "This is an offer because you matter here. Your talent matters. And you are giving my son something I cannot give him, no matter how hard I try." She swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. She didn't want to owe anyone anything. She didn't want to be a burden. But she also couldn't deny how much she cared for the boy, how much she wanted to help him, be there for him, and allow his quiet smile to guide her days. "I'm scared," she whispered honestly. The CEO nodded. "I know, but sometimes new things are worth trying. Sometimes they lead us to what we were missing." She took a deep breath, thinking. She remembered the nights she had slept on uncomfortable benches, the days she wandered the streets with her thin jacket pulled tightly around her shoulders. She remembered wishing for a place where she wasn't just passing through. Slowly, she nodded. "I'll stay. If it helps him. And if it's really okay." The CEO's expression softened. "It's more than okay." He stood and spoke in a warm voice. "Welcome to your new home." That evening, the boy sat near the piano as usual. When he heard her footsteps, he smiled immediately. "You're here," he said softly. She sat next to him and gently guided his hand to the piano keys. "I have something to tell you," she said. He tilted his head. "What is it?" She took a breath, nervous but excited. "I'm going to stay here. For real. I'm not leaving tomorrow. Or the next day. I'll be here with you." The boy's face lit up in a way she had never seen before. "You mean you're going to stay for a long time?" "Yes," she said softly. "If you want me to." He reached out and held her hand tightly. "I want that more than anything." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, their hands still gently touching. Then the boy whispered, "Will you play something for me? Something that feels like staying?" She smiled. "I think I know what to play." She placed her fingers on the keys and began a soft, warm melody. It wasn't a grand song or a complex composition. It was simple, like a quiet promise spoken through music. The notes rose gently, then settled like falling leaves, carrying a feeling of safety and belonging. The CEO stood near the doorway, listening. He didn't step in or interrupt. He simply let the music fill the space, feeling a kind of peace he hadn't felt in years. As the melody wrapped around the room, the girl felt something shift inside her too. She no longer felt like a visitor. She no longer felt like someone just passing through life with no direction. For the first time, she felt like she had a place where she could grow. The boy leaned slightly toward the piano, letting the sound guide him. He wasn't afraid anymore of the darkness he lived in. The music made it feel less overwhelming. When the last note faded, he whispered, "It feels like home." She looked at him gently. "It does." From that day forward, the house was no longer a quiet, distant place, filled only with responsibility and schedules. It became a place where music flowed every day, where soft laughter echoed in the halls, and where a girl who once had nothing found a path to something she never expected: family, safety, and purpose. And the CEO, who once believed he had everything under control, learned that sometimes the most important changes come from the smallest, most unexpected moments. A simple melody, a shy smile, a girl with a gentle heart. Together, they formed a new beginning, not out of wealth, not out of power, but out of kindness, connection, and the quiet strength of a song shared between souls who needed each other more than they knew.